Today's our topic is about overview of nervous system. Organization of human nervous system is structurally divided into the central nervous system, CNS, and peripheral nervous system, PNS. Components of CNS are the brain and spinal cord, and components of this PNS are somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. In the early stages of development, three icons layers of tissue develops within the embryo: the endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. And the nervous system develops from a section of the ectoderms called the neuronal plate, which begins to differentiate this under the influence of this nearby no-touched paraxial mesoderm around the 3rd week. During the 3rd week of development, the outermost layer of the embryo, the ectoderm, thickens to form a neural plate. This plate develops a longitudinally running neural groove, which depends so that it's flanked on either side by neural folds. These folds further develop and eventually fuse during a process called neuralization to form a long tube-like structure called the neural tube with an inner element called the neural canal. And the continued proliferation of the cells at the cephalic and cause the neural tube to dilate and form the 3 primary brain vessels: the prosencephalon, we know it's forebrain, mesencephalon, midbrain, and the rhombencephalon, the hindbrain, which later gave rise to structure of the brain. This was about development, and let's begin this. The nervous system is your body's information processing and communication system. It receives messages, processes information, and then sends signals to the rest of your body telling it what to do. The nervous system has 2 distinct parts: the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. I was talking about it. And the nervous system is involved in everything you think, say, and do. Let's begin discussing with the brain. It's like the central processing unit. It's a pure and in a computer like, and the brain receives information from your eyes, ears, nose, and other sense organs, and it processes information and generates through the ideas. Then the brain sends messages to your body. For example, it tells your muscles how to move so you can walk, talk, and to do things you want your body to do. Your brain also controls a lot of what you does without you thinking about it. For example, your brain automatically adjusts your breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. And next, we have here the spinal cord. It's a long tube of nerves like a thick electrical cable. The spinal cord runs from your brain down your back through the whole center of your spine. Nerves in the brain send messages down your spinal cord. Other nerves in spinal cord relay those messages to the body. The spinal cord also carries messages from the body to your brain. Nerves are like signal wires. Each nerve contains fibers from many these nerve cells. The fibers are bundled together for strength and protection from injury. The basic unit of the nervous system is a nerve cell called neuron. A nerve cell consists of a large cell body and 2 types of nerve fibers. Let's see, this is axon, and dendrites. Axon is a long, slender nerve fiber that projects from a nerve cell and can send messages as electrical impulses to other nerve cells and muscles. And dendrites, branch of nerve cells that receives electrical impulses. Normally, nerves transmit impulses electrically in one direction from the impulse-sending axon of one nerve cell to the impulse-receiving dendrites of the next nerve cell. At contact point between nerve cells, the axon secretes tiny amount of chemical messengers, neurotransmitters, we call them, and these neurotransmitters triggers the receptors of this next nerve cell dendrites to produce a new electrical current. Different type of nerves use different neurotransmitters to convey impulses across the synapses. The synapse is a contact between nerve cells, and some of these impulses stimulate the next nerve cells, whereas others inhibit it. The brain and the spinal cord also contains support cells called these glial cells. These cells are different from nerve cells and don't produce electrical impulses. These are several types, including the following. We have here astrocytes, ependymal cells, these glial progenitor cells, microglia, and these oligodendrocytes. Let's talk about these astrocytes. These cells provide nutrients to nerve cells and control the chemical composition of fluid around nerve cells, enabling them to thrive. They can regulate the neurotransmitters and the external chemical environment around nerve cells to influence how often nerve cells send impulses and thus regulate how active groups of nerve cells may be. And the Schwann cells, also called neuronal cells, any of the cells in the peripheral nervous system that produce a myelin sheet around neuron axons. Schwann cells are named after German physiologist Theodor Schwann, who discovered them in the 19th century. And ependymal cells, the cells form along open areas in the brain and spinal cord to create the release cerebrospinal fluid, which passes cells of the nervous system. And this microglia, these cells help protect the brain against injury and help remove debris from dead cells. These cells can move around in the nervous system and can multiply to protect the brain during an injury. And oligodendrocytes, these cells form a coating around nerve cell axons and make a specialist membrane called myelin, a fatty substance that insulates nerve axons and speeds the conduction of impulses along nerve fibers. I want to talk about the Schwann cells also. I said these are also glial cells. However, these cells are in the peripheral nervous system rather than in the brain and the spinal cord. And these cells are similar to oligodendrocytes and make myelin to insulate axons in the peripheral nervous system. The brain and spinal cord consist of gray and white matter. The gray matter consists of nerve cells bodies, dendrites and axons, with glial cells and capillaries. And white matter contains relatively very few neurons and consists mainly of axons that are wrapped with many layers of myelin and of the oligonucleotides that make them myelin. This myelin is what makes the white matter white, and the myelin coating around the axon speeds the conduction of nerve impulses. And next, let's talk about this. That nerve cells routinely increase or decrease the number of connections they have with other nerve cells. This process may partly explain how people learn, adapt, and form these memories. But the brain and spinal cord really produce new nerve cells. An exception is the this hippocampus and an area of the brain involved in memory formation. And you can see in this slide that what does the peripheral nervous system do? That connects the central nervous system to the organs, limbs, and skins, carries sensory and motor information to inform the central nervous system, allows the brain and spinal cord to receive and send information to other areas of body, and regulates involuntary body functions like hair speed, and breathing. And we will show it. Okay, this slide. That I want to talk about this peripheral system, that it's one of two components that make up this nervous system, with the other part being the central nervous system. And the PNS consists of the nerves and ganglia outside the brain and spinal cord. And the main function of PNS is to connect the CNS to the limbs and organs, essentially serving as a relay between the brain and spinal cord and the rest of the body. Unlike the CNS, the PNS is not protected by the vertebral column and skull, or by the blood-brain barrier, which leaves it exposed to toxins and mechanical injuries. Since the peripheral nerves include the cranial nerves, the spinal nerves, and roots, and what are called the autonomic nerves. The autonomic nerves are concerned with autonomic function of body. Specifically, autonomic nerves are involved with the regulation of heart muscle. I was talking about it. The tiny muscles lining the walls of blood vessels and glands, and the peripheral in anatomy and medicine is the opposite of central. It means situated away from the center. The word peripheral comes from the Greek peripheria, around or about the brain, to bear, carry. Let's roll the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is divided into the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. In the somatic nervous system, the cranial nerves are part of the PNS, with the exception of the optic nerve, this cranial nerve second, and along with the retina. And the second cranial nerve is not a true peripheral nerve, but a tract of the diencephalon. And cranial nerve ganglia originate in the CNS, however, the remaining the 10 cranial nerve axon extends beyond the brain and are therefore considered part of the PNS. The autonomic nervous system exerts involuntary control over smooth muscle and glands, and the connection between CNS and organs allows the system to be in two different functional states, sympathetic and parasympathetic. The CNS, the somatic nervous system, or voluntary nervous system, is a part of the peripheral nervous system associated with the voluntary control of body movement via skeletal muscle. The somatic nervous system consists of sensory nerves carrying afferent nerve fibers that relay sensation from the body to the central nervous system. The other nerves in the somatic nervous system are motor nerves carrying efferent nerve fibers that relay motor commands from the CNS to stimulate muscle contraction. There are like this was 43 segmental of nerves in the human body. With each segmental, there is a pair of sensory and motor nerves in the body. 21 segmental of nerves are in the spinal cord and 12 are in the brainstem. Besides these, thousands of these nerves are also presented in the body, and thus the somatic nervous system consists of two parts: spinal nerves, which they are these mixed nerves that carry sensory information into a motor command out of the spinal cord, and cranial nerves. These are the nerve fibers that carry information into and out of the brainstem. They include smell, vision, eyes, muscles, mouth, chest, ear, neck, shoulder, and tongue. And the somatic nervous system controls all voluntary muscular system within the body, and the process of voluntary reflexes, RCs, and the basic route of nerve signals within the efferent somatic nervous system involves a sequence that begins in the upper cell bodies of motor neurons within the procentral gyrus, and stimuli from the precentral gyrus are transmitted from upper motor neurons down corticospinal tract to lower motor neurons in the brainstem and ventral horn of the spinal cord. Upper motor neurons release the neurotransmitters called this glutamate from their axon's terminal nodes, which is received by glutamate receptors on the lower motor neurons. From this, acetylcholine is released from the axon terminal node of alpha motor neurons and received by postsynaptic receptors of muscles, thereby relaying the stimulus to contract muscle fibers. And the autonomic nervous system, this ANS, formerly referred to as the vegetative nervous system, is a division of the peripheral nervous system that supplies smooth muscle and glands, and thus influence the function of internal organs. And the autonomic nervous system is a control system that acts largely on and consequently it regulates bodily functions such as heart rate, digestion, respiratory rate, pulmonary responsive coordination, and the others. This system is a primary mechanism in control of the fight or flight response. The autonomic nervous system is regulated by intermediate reflexes through the brainstem to the spinal cord and organs. Autonomic functions include control of respiration, cardiac regulation, vasomotor activity, and certain reflex actions such as coughing, sneezing, swallowing, and vomiting. Those are then divided into other areas and are also to autonomic subsystems and the peripheral nervous system, and the hypothalamus just above the brainstem acts as integrator for these autonomic functions, receiving autonomic regulatory input from the limbic system. And the autonomic nervous system has two branches: the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is often considered the fight or flight system, while the parasympathetic nervous system is often considered the rest and digest or feed and breathe system. In many cases, both of these systems have opposite action, where one system activates a physiological response and the other inhibits it. And older simplification of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system as its excitatory and inhibitory was overturned due to the many exceptions found. A more modern characterization is that the sympathetic nervous system is a quick response mobilizing system, and the parasympathetic is a more slowly activate damping system. But even this has exceptions, such as the sexual arousal and orgasm, and where both play a role. And next we have here sympathetic nervous system. Let's talk about it. The division of this nervous system that function to produce localized adjustment, such as switching as a response to an increase in temperature and reflex adjustment of the cardiovascular system. Under condition of stress, the entire sympathetic nervous system is activated, producing an immediate widespread response called the fight or flight response. This response is characterized by the release of large quantities of epinephrine from the adrenal gland and increase in heart rate and increase in cardiac output, skeletal muscle vasodilation, cutaneous and gastrointestinal vasoconstriction, papillary dilatation, bronchial dilatation, and pleural erection and pleural erection, and the overall effect is to prepare the individual for imminent this danger. The actions of this sympathetic nervous system occur in concert with other neural or hormonal response to stress, including increases in corticotropin and cortisol secretion. In humans, this chronic stress results in long-term stimulation of the fight or flight response, which leads to constant produce and secretion of catecholamines and hormones such as cortisol. Long-term stress include induct this secretion of this substance is associated with a variety of physiological consequences. And anatomically, the sympathetic preganglionic neurons, the cell bodies of which are located within the central nervous system, originate in the lateral horn of the 12 thoracic and the first 2 or 3 lumbar segments of the spinal cord. For this reason, the sympathetic system is sometimes referred to as the thoracolumbar outflow, and the axons of these neurons exit the spinal cord in the ventral roots and then synapse on either sympathetic ganglion cells or specialist cells in the adrenal gland called these chromaffin cells. And let's talk about this parasympathetic nervous system. It's division of the nervous system that primarily modulate visual organs such as glands. And the parasympathetic nervous system is one of the two antagonist sets of nerves of the autonomic nervous system. The other set composes the sympathetic nervous system. While providing important control of many tissues, the parasympathetic system is not critical for the maintenance of like unlike the sympathetic system, which activates the so-called fight or flight response. And the nerve fibers of this parasympathetic nervous system are the cranial nerves, primarily the vagus nerve, and the lumbar spinal nerves. When stimulated, these nerves increase digestive secretion and reduce the hair rate. And the parasympathetic nervous system is organized in a manner similar to the sympathetic nervous system. Its motor component consists of preganglionic and postganglionic neurons. The preganglionic neurons are located in specific cell groups in the brainstem or in the lateral horn of the spinal cord and the sacral levels. Preganglionic axon emerging from the brainstem project to parasympathetic ganglia that are located in the head or here the heart are embedded in the end or organ itself or are situated a short distance from the urinary bladder. Both pre and postganglionic neuron secrete this acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter, but like sympathetic ganglion cells, they also contain other neuroactive chemical agents that function as transmitter. In this picture, we can say that really this sympathetic and parasympathetic are antagonists. When sympathetic, for example, delays this pupils, this parasympathetic constricts, and when sympathetic relaxes bronchi, this parasympathetic this constricts. When parasympathetic stimulates bile releases, this sympathetic stimulates glucose production and the release. When, for example, sympathetic system inhibits this bladder contraction, parasympathetic system contracts bladder. So we can say that the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems really are antagonists